Another dimension of confessing the same sins over and over again is that you don't have a plan. We can't just expect that decades, years, months of bad habits called vices are suddenly going to flip instantly like a switch. That's probably unrealistic. Have you ever found yourself confessing the same sins over and over again and wondering if you'll ever make the turn around the corner to a life of virtue and away from your past life of sin? This can be a tremendous cause of frustration and discouragement. And in this video, I want to spend a few moments walking through with you the spirituality and a little bit of the psychology about confessing the same sins over and over again. And as always, if you like our content on the channel, please feel free to like, subscribe, and share. So you're going to confession on a regular basis, and you discover in doing so that you're confessing the same sins over and over again. Now, you might ask yourself, why does this keep happening? Or what can I do about it? Or you might be saying to yourself, gosh, I'm really frustrated and discouraged by my sins. Let me start with that point, because I think that's the first and easiest thing to kind of demythify. When one commits sins over and over again, it's typically based on a bad habit called a vice. Here, I'm not talking about addictions, which is its own category of psychosis that could be addressed perhaps in another video, but besides addiction, just repeated sins. This would be called a habitual vice. So a type of habit called a vice. Habits that are good are called virtues, and that's what you're moving towards. But when you're confessing the same sin over and over again, one of the first things that penitents, we feel, is discouragement. Despair, even to a degree, not severe despair, but just sort of a lack of hopefulness that somehow we can turn the corner on the sin. But here I want to dissuade you from falling into discouragement. So often when I talk to penitents who are struggling with habitual sins, repeated sins, and you can tell in their voice that they are frustrated, I have to remind the penitents, and here I can remind you, do not be discouraged or surprised by your sins. Remember, the months, weeks, years, even decades that it took for you to form the vice, the bad habit, is usually not undone right away. You have to give yourself a little bit of mercy, a little bit of grace, a little bit of forgiveness to understand that it'll sometimes take multiple attempts at the sacrament of penance, even sometimes for years, to be able to turn the corner habitually, permanently into virtue. It's not easy. We live in a society where we want things yesterday, rapid. We don't want to wait. We think things should just be taken care of and immediately resolved. But that's not life. That's not the human experience. And in many times that can lead to the discouragement, which gets people to stop confessing at all. And that's exactly what the devil wants. And here I want to introduce the idea of what the devil is trying to sow here, which is this discouragement and despair, small d, that we don't go back to confession, that we just give up on the project. So I sometimes have to remind penitents, and I'll remind you, our viewer, that the reason that we priests are in the confessional week in and week out is because we want you to be able to experience the mercy of God. So believe you me, we're not discouraged by your sins, nor are we even surprised by them. And if we're not, then maybe neither should you be as well. Now, another dimension of confessing the same sins over and over again that I've discovered is that the person who confesses sins over and over again, you don't have a plan. You don't have a plan, plain and simple. Meaning to say, you go to confession and you make an integral whole confession. Means you have sins to confess, you're sorry for your sins, and you have a firm purpose of amendment, an intent not to sin again. But you don't leave the confessional or your time of making your penance, maybe you're saying your 3 Hail Marys in the church after your confession, with a plan. And so you fall back into the same sin over and over again, but you've made no real resolution in terms of a concrete plan as to what to do moving forward. And sometimes these plans have to be fairly radical. For instance, if you struggle with gossip, Maybe for a while you need to avoid certain people who lead you down that road. Maybe you struggle with things regarding your cell phone, whether it's wasting time or perhaps looking at material that's inappropriate and morally illicit. Maybe that phone needs to be in another room, or maybe you need to go back to an old-fashioned alarm clock, because I know many of us use our phones like our alarm clock as well. But that's too much of a temptation, in the middle of the night when you're lying in bed, whatever the case may be. But if you don't have a concrete plan, it's unrealistic to expect that that's actually going to happen beyond your mere willpower. We can't just expect that decades, years, months of bad habits called vices are suddenly going to flip instantly like a switch, and we're going to be able to live a life of virtue. That's probably unrealistic and not going to happen. The last part that needs to be considered when we're confessing sins over and over again is simply, do we make an intentional examination of conscience every night before we go to bed to review whether or not we have attacked or gone after trying to correct behaviors or thought patterns that have led to the sin? Many times people just live unconsciously in the sense of not being aware of their state of soul or where God's graces are trying to help move us to a life of virtue. And then they find themselves falling into the same sin over and over again. Every night, we need to take at least 2 to 3 minutes to make a very brief examination of conscience. This can be done simply before we retire for the evening. It could be after dinner when we perhaps have a quiet moment alone, or we're saying our night prayers. Whatever the case may be, we have to be deliberate and intentional in making sure that we're cognizant of the fact that we're trying to correct past behaviors so that we can move into this new space of virtue and life. So if you find yourself confessing the same sins over and over again, remember, it's not just simply the devil's after you. A lot of people want to blame the devil, but the reality is that the devil doesn't have to do anything because you set himself up quite well to commit the sin over and over again. Instead, we have to be more intentional and make sure that we're being very deliberate about our desire and sometimes our radical decisions and changes of behavior to move forward. Again, I implore you, please do not be discouraged by your sins. Keep coming back to confession, working with that priest, and worry not. We are not discouraged, and we invite you not to be either. If you like this video and others like it, please feel free to click on the links above. And as always, thanks and God bless.